The Baetis Nymph was designed for selective trout, especially for the South Platte River in Colorado, but works equally as well on any spring creek or selective trout waters. So to get started, the hook we're going to use is a 2x long hook that has a ring eye in it. Get it in here. And we're going to attach some thread here. Since we're dealing with a olive color today, we'll make this to represent the blue-winged olive. So we get our thread on there, and we just go down onto the bend of the hook a little ways, and from there we're going to tie in our tail. For the tail, what we're going to be using is partridge. So what we do is just select a nice brown partridge feather, and we're going to clean it up just a little bit. Take off some of that fuzz, because we're not going to be using any of that. Just pull that right on off. And for the tail on a natural is fairly sparse, so we're not going to have to use a whole lot of fibers of this partridge. So I'll just reach in here and just pull off a few. But we're going to hold on to that feather because we're going to use it later for some legs. So we grab our tail, make sure the tips are all nice and even, and then we're going to hold it up to the hook shank on the side towards you. And for the length, you want to be roughly about the gap of the hook in length. So I re-grab it with my left hand, and then I'm going to take a turn of thread, and as I do that, the material automatically goes right up on top of the hook shank. And then we'll just tie down the rest of the material. And that just aids in building up some of the underbody for us. And if you happen to get a little scraggler, just go in there and cut that right off. For the body material, what we're going to be using is a fairly new material which is called D-rib. D-rib is flat on one side and semicircular on the other. So to add more segmentation to your fly, we're going to have the rounded side on the top. Before you tie this in, since you're going to be tying this basically in size 18 to 22s, you want to take your D-rib and come in with your scissors, and you want to cut it at an angle. Get a little more of a taper here. Let me turn this around. So we have a nice little taper, and that's how we're going to tie it in by the tip. Now before I tie it in, I'm going to look at it to make sure that I have the round side facing me. So I'll set the tip up there. I'm going to catch it with my thread on the side towards me. And then I just tie it in there fairly tight, and I'm giving quite a bit of pressure there with my thread. And then I just continue tying that tip in and bring my thread forward. Since we're dealing with a fairly large size hook, for demonstration purposes here, what I'm going to need to do is build up a taper from the tail portion up to the front. Either we can do that with our thread, just by going back and forth, just building it up a little bit, or to speed things along if you wanted, you could use some dubbing. But since I've already started with the thread here, we'll just continue doing the thread underbody. That way it'll be nice and smooth, and then whatever color thread that I'm using will kind of show through the D-rib since it's kind of semi-transparent.
Go ahead and move the camera.
Let's build this up a little bit, and we're getting that taper. And as we're building up that taper, I'm sure you can see just how the taper is building from the tail to the front because of the point of view camera here. And what that is, it's actually showing you a view from my eye level. just so that you can have a more detailed look at what I'm doing here. Now that looks like we have a little bit of a taper there. Now we're going to wrap our D-rib forward. So on smaller flies, what you want to do is the first couple wraps is you want to take the D-rib and you want to stretch it fairly tight. You want to take a couple wraps that are fairly tight, laying one right in front of the other, just like so. And then as we start coming further on up the hook shank, you start easing up on the tension a little bit. And what actually happens, you build in an automatic taper to it. So by the time I get up towards the thorax area, I have very little tension on the D-rib. Take a couple more turns here. Now I'm ready to tie it off. We'll get this excess out of the way. And we're going to tie it off. Just take several turns of thread to make sure it doesn't slip on you when you come in to tie it off. Now that we have it tied down, you just come in and cut it off. And then we're just going to set our D-rib to the side. Now most nymphs, regardless if it's a small one or a big one, when you're at the quarter waypoint behind the hook eye, you're ready to tie in your wing case. This one's going to be done just a little bit different. So we're going to take our thread right up to the hook eye. And this is the point in which we're going to tie in our wing case. For the wing case, what I'm going to be using is medallion sheeting. Medallion sheeting, when it was first made, was basically made so we had synthetic winging material with some color in it. But what I have found that the material is probably even better suited for are wing cases on nymphs. This happens to be an olive brown color, which is perfect to go with this olive body. So what we want to do is come in, and we're going to just kind of slide our scissors right on up it to the width that we want, instead of cutting it and then ripping it. So we have a little hunk of the sheeting here. And then we're going to take this right up to the hook eye. Now, when dealing with a solid wing case material, so that it kind of molds around the hook shank, what you want to do is hold half of it on the side towards you. That way, when you take your thread over the top, it kind of molds right around the hook. And then you, whoops. You hold it, you got to pinch it a little bit. And then as you come over the top, it just molds right around the hook, and then you cinch up on it, and it takes several more wraps. And to make sure that you don't have any wrinkles right in here, you just grab it and tug on it a little bit. Now we're ready to build up the thorax a little bit. For the thorax, what I like to use is a new dubbing out called micro dry fly dubbing. It's a natural material, and it has been dyed specifically to match hatches. This is a blue-winged olive color with a tint of gray. It's really fine, so we don't, for small flies, and as we get this on here, you can just see how easy it goes. And you don't have that much buildup. So we'll get that on there. And we'll just wrap some dubbing down. Cover up our thorax area. Just need a little bit more, because we're going to add a couple more things here before the thorax is completely finished. Just a little bit, there we go, right up at the eye. We basically want to finish with our thread hanging in the middle of the thorax. Now we're ready to put some legs in here. For our legs, what we're going to be using is the rest of that partridge that we had used for our tail. But before we tie it in, what we're going to do is basically lay the feather tip against your finger, and then you can take a pair of sharp-nosed scissors like stonefly puts out, and you just kind of jab it in there and snip. And what that does, it creates a nice little V in your hackle. That way when you take your wing case through it, it doesn't tend to tie down any of the materials. So what we're going to do is kind of group these fibers all together, and then we're going to measure it for length. I'm going to measure it from the hook eye to about the halfway point of the fly's body. And then I'm going to transfer it up into the thorax. And I'm just going to tie it down right there in the middle of the thorax. Take several turns of thread, and then I'm just going to cut off the excess. Now we're ready to add some more dubbing. And what we're going to do is basically cover up where we cut off the excess leg material. And what we're going to do is kind of post those partridge legs. So we add a little dubbing. We're going to cover up where we cut off our legging material. Add a little more here so we can go up in front of it. And when you're using dubbing, you always want to twist in the same direction instead of going back and forth so your dubbing doesn't come unloose. Now what I'm going to do is just pull the sheeting down and the legs back. And I'll keep a hold of those legs. And I'm just going to wrap right in front of it. And what that does is it posts those legs. And I have about one more turn of thread left here with some dubbing on it, which I want, and I take it right behind the legs. Now what I'm going to do is split the legs, and to do that I just come in here with my index finger and use my fingernail and just push down. And as I push down, you can just kind of see how the partridge automatically splits in two. So I grab the side towards me, and then I'll bring my wing case backwards. Kind of lost it there. There we go. And the reason for putting our legs in the middle of the thorax is because if you look at any bug, the legs don't come out of their head. They come out of the middle of their thorax. And that was the whole idea behind this fly. Now that we have the wing case towards the back, we're going to come in here and just tie it down. Just take a fairly loose wrap, and if you want your legs to go towards the back a little bit, just kind of pull a little bit tighter on your sheeting, and then take a couple more wraps of your thread. And then what you do is come on the underside, and then you hook your thread up at the hook eye. Now what we're going to do is just take our thread, whip finish it off. Take a couple whip finishes here, and we're ready to take our thread off. And whenever I cut my thread, I'm sure you can just see that, I always pull it tight so you can see the hook move a little bit. It creates a tension so when I cut it, I don't have a loose little tag of thread hanging out. So what I'm going to do is pull back on the sheeting a little bit, and to create a little wing case, I just pull straight back on the wing case material. I'm going to come in with my scissors straight over the top, and I'll just cut it short, just like that. And what just happened, I automatically cut a little V in the wing case so that I have a little wing pad area. If your legs aren't quite where you want them, you can kind of pull them out a little bit. And then we have the finished fly of the Baetis Nymph.